Thank you so much for staying with us. Let's look at the issue of illegal mining there, the suspected illegal miners. Remember last week we bring you the story of Sabi there, when you saw a number of them, quite a sizable number of them, over 100 there being rescued. And Tlamulo Mabasa was tracking that story for us and just giving us a sense of the things that were going underground. But what is the big concern there is that you saw a lot of young children and that were coming up from that shaft who were being rescued. It's the same also in the northwest in Stilfontein, where we also saw some children there suspected to be involved in illegal mining. So what are some of the security concerns that are posed by the story, and what are we not seeing around this issue? We now speak to Andy Mashaile, who is the Strategy and Security Advisor and retired Interpol Ambassador. Good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. You think about the fact that you look at a 14-year-old emerge from what would be a shaft together with some suspected illegal miners. And one then thinks about the fact that, one, they're probably not South African, as some of them are not. And two, the issue of the porous borders comes up. But what are we not seeing?
What we are not seeing, Osbongi, is that syndicates that deal with human trafficking that have decided to take over the disused mine shafts will go to all extents to ensure that they've got slaves, what you and I call victims of human trafficking at that age. It's actually those who are forced into labor, what you and I should correctly label slavery in the modern day.
And you talk about this issue of slavery because when you speak to listening to some of those that were being spoken to in the Sabi, for example, in Mpumalanga, they were saying that they came into the country looking for employment, and then a man took them to this particular shaft, that's what they claim, and pointed firearms at them and told them to get underground and not come out until they find what they're looking for. This was a story that most of them were telling, and I suppose listening to what you're saying, you can kind of believe what they said?
Yes, ma'am. Kidnapping that we have seen of children in and surrounding the SADC areas coming into South Africa, like the combi that was impounded and the driver arrested for having 14 young people there, or kids, the youngest being 4 years old, the oldest being 16. It tells you that either being going to be groomed for sexual exploitation, forced labor in the agricultural industry, all of these things where children are not supposed to be. It tells you and I that the syndicates have gone for another method of operation to ensure that they benefit and they destroy life and limb. And I want to say they must be hanged within the confines of the laws, those who waste young people's life, especially children's lives.
But why is it so difficult to nab those who are behind some of these syndicates? Because there's a lot of concern about them, and you listen to authorities, they talk about the fact that they now want to close the net in on them. But why is it so difficult to catch them?
The different levels make it so much difficult because that driver of that taxi is just a runner. When he's arrested, a new recruit comes into the picture to do trafficking. There are syndicates that specialize with trafficking. There are syndicates that recruit young people. There are syndicates that make sure that there are those who are forced to go underground. So you have a sizable number of a complicated web of operations that makes it difficult for the one on top to be arrested. When you deal with these levels, it becomes much more difficult. Some of them at the lower levels don't know who the mastermind is. They know the immediate supervisor.
And I suppose the issue of the borders is not helping there.
The issue of the borders is definitely not helping. But we must congratulate the BMA, particularly with the suspension of the 13 guards a week or two or so ago, and also the arrest of the 78 members of BMA, though that is a new unit. And if you find corruption in there, it compromises the security of the country, of the economy, and of the children in and around the SADC area into South Africa, ballooning the cost of this country to saving those that we have just been talking about.
How should SADC be responding to this?
All crime intelligence operations in the SADC area should work hand in glove. Provide the leadership being provided by South Africa. They must be able to know who are the recruiters and share that information with South Africa. In the event that they could not prevent that crime, South Africa would then be ready to combat that crime, to do the necessary investigations, arrest them at the borders, send them back or send them into our prosecution system and incarceration system.
Can South Africa play this lead role, though? And I ask this because on Friday, in fact, Saturday, I was in conversation with AMCU President Joseph Mathunja on this issue of illegal mining. And he was saying that South African intelligence gathering is so flawed and is so pretty much, for him, a problem, that this is why then you are seeing that kingpins are able to thrive. And he says that we should then have a tighter intelligence gathering system that's able to then intercept some of what's going on. So can South Africa play this lead role, though, if there are questions that are being raised about intelligence?
South Africa can play that role. It must find the will to do it, because it is not a favor that you have crime intelligence on our law enforcement agencies. It is a requirement and a prescription of the constitution of this country. So in my space, if I were there, Osbongi, I would just put it straight. You either deliver or we show you the door. So that long story cut very short. I think the people of this country, starting with both you and I, should be able to say to crime intelligence, management and leadership, get your act the correct way so that you save us and you save the children from outside of the country and many other ills that come through as a result of the weakness, systemic and systematic.
And what risk are we posing, particularly as a continent, if we are going to now have children that are going to be taking part in such acts, and we're seeing the rise in unemployment? And one thinks about the fact that, they won't be going to school if they are kidnapped and are now having to be kept as modern-day slaves.
You are going to have those children becoming very violent, 1. 2, coming out of there with no money in their pockets, having it worked, their levels up and down. They would then be able not to have any fear of picking up a gun, hijacking you and I, and going into our houses. And secondly, we are creating monsters for those countries back there where they come from, because some of them would go back and deal with the individuals who recruited them violently and militantly, and to such an extent that you would be having this situation happening over and over and over and over again. That also affecting national security, because when you compromise border security, you are allowing evil and satanic elements to come into our country to mess our systems and increase unemployment rate, by extension increase the crime rate, by extension ensure that you are sponsoring the people who go into the disused mines for the sake of extracting that gold illegally, and also perpetuating this evil that we're talking about, young people in those disused shafts. It
really sounds like an urgent situation, and as you say, that it's time that it is dealt with. But thank you so much for talking to us this evening. I appreciate it. That was Mashaile, who's the Strategy and Security Advisor and retired Interpol Ambassador.